Throw Electronic Productions, baby.
Welcome. Decided to do a little live podcast because the old lady is up working right now. Speaking of that, check out the link in the description for my Patreon, where I talk about things I can't talk about here, and also check out my merch store where I got t-shirts, Let's Go Brandon t-shirts, I Will Not Comply t-shirts, all types of t-shirts, anime stuff, all types of t-shirts, and it's all made here in-house, so everything you purchase, it goes to fund what we're doing here. Today I wanted to do something a little different. React to my one of my favorite shows, one of my favorite news information shows is Trunews, Christian Bible founded news organization. I've been listening to them for years. I think they're one of the best. It's a shame they got the boot from the platform because their views, and they've been right, all the stuff they've been saying that they got booted from the platform from is turned out to be true. It's crazy. They've been attacked, called all types of slurs and stuff, all types of stuff, when none of it is true. These are real God-fearing people. But I figured, won't y'all watch this episode while I watch it, and I'll pause it every once in a while and commentate. I'm not sure if I'll be able to watch the whole thing. Depends on how late my old lady stay up, but let's go ahead and get into this. All right.
This is True News, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help us God. I'm Rick Wiles. Here are today's top headlines from True News. Russia's prime minister says his country has the power to put America in its place.
Caveat, I am going to be like reading news and stuff while I'm listening to this too, so you'll see my head darting everywhere because I got like 3 screens going, and I got my phone going because I'm always reading and checking out news and stuff, so that's why you see my head going back and forth and stuff. And if they start talking about the bug, if they start talking about the stupid 19, I'll fast forward that part because you know how sensitive they are over here on this platform. So if it gets to any dicey issues that I know I'll get flagged for, I'll fast forward it through those things. So I'm not sure if it get dicey or not. I haven't watched this episode, but we'll see.
Russian ships seen near Japan may be transporting troops to Ukraine. The United States of America has 100,000 soldiers stationed in Europe. Calls are increasing for more psychological warfare operations against Russia, and thousands of vaccinated people say the COVID-19 vaccine gave them severe tinnitus.
Up. I can't. I'm gonna have to fast forward when he get through that part, because you know, even though it could be scientifically proven, you can have all the research in the world. We knows what happened when it comes to stuff like that, with censorship and getting booted from platforms and stuff. So when he started talking about that part, I am unfortunately gonna fast forward through it, and I'll probably go back and listen to it later myself and do a report on it and maybe put it on my Patreon or something. But be known, I'm gonna let it. I mean, I hate to censor, but when he start talking about that stuff, I'm gonna have to do it because I've already been booted. Once. So let's go.
Let's start with the 2 wars that are being fought today. The first war is Russia's military operation against Ukraine. The second war is the psychological warfare the West is waging against Russia. Doc Burkhart is here with me.
Yes, sir.
Yesterday, Doc, President Biden, it was reported as though he was overheard, like an open mic moment, in which he called Russian President Vladimir Putin a war criminal. We've got the video of it. Let's watch it and then we'll comment.
Now you have Ireland and Great Britain and the Republic standing together against a murderous dictator, a pure thug who is waging an immoral war against the people of Ukraine. And by the way, the Republic is paying a big price for this, a big number for supporting the strategy, for supporting the sanctions, including aircraft, a whole range of things. It's not a minor contribution they're making to this effort. It's significant. Ireland and the United States are working together for the first time now. They're on the United Nations Security Council. Ireland's a part of the Security Council now.
All right, actually, I hadn't seen that video.
Yeah, the
I thought
war
we
criminal comment was from yesterday, but this was a special message he had for, he was speaking to the Irish American League or something like that, and so he made the comment here. So on top of Vladimir Putin being a war criminal, he's a murderous dictator. He's also a thug. He's called him a thug in the past.
And a killer.
So, right.
And a killer.
So,
well, where I was going with this, and this actually amplifies it, is that yesterday's so-called hot mic moment really was planned. There's nothing unplanned in politics. And so it was part of the psychological.
And I would say especially it had to be planned with Biden, because you can't have Biden come off the cuff and try to be unpredictable, because this guy hardly knows who he is. So he has to stick to the script. That's why whenever he goes off script, he'd be like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, or, they don't want me to say this. But who is the they? His handlers, because he really is suffering from dementia. He definitely showing signs of dementia. So he everything that he says, I believe, is definitely scripted.
Psychological warfare against Russia and Vladimir Putin.
Right.
They got into the world news headlines in every country. Joe Biden calls Vladimir Putin a war criminal, which is a criminal accusation.
Yes.
It's just not a name. It's just not an ugly name. It's a criminal accusation against another leader.
that means they'll take somebody, put them in the chair at The Hague, and put them on trial.
That's right.
So,
which is what they did to Milosevic of Yugoslavia. Now, so he repeated it today. So you got it back to back, 2 days. This is planned. So you're going to hear a lot of war criminal, war criminal, war criminal coming out of the mouths of a lot of politicians and news media people, because those are the talking points for today. Now, CBN's founder, Pat Robertson, he said it is time for the United States of America to call Russia's bluff. This is his remarks.
We have the firepower to wipe out every.
Now, I did see this. This is a darn shame. I can't believe this guy is such a warmonger. Instead of speaking peace, he's talking about. Just listen to this. You just have to listen. This is a shame.
Every Russian city, just one Trident submarine, and of course we're not using it and have no intention of using it. But why doesn't somebody in the administration call Putin's bluff? He's bluffing. And every time he says, well, if you do that, we're going to escalate. Oh, no, you're not, old buddy. We're going to do you. If you try to do us, we'll make it worse, and you know it. Putin knows we're powerful. He doesn't have much of an army. He doesn't have much of an economy. It's a tiny economy, and he's playing a bluff. But unfortunately, we have a man in charge in Washington who doesn't like to stand up to bluffs. He folds his winning hand every single time.
Well, my former employer never misses an opportunity to promote war. That's something I've learned about.
How can you be a Christian and be so much for wanting to go to war? Like, I don't understand. I don't. Instead of him being like, well, maybe cooler heads should prevail, and we should pray for both sides, and hopefully they come together and have a treaty and peace. And instead of saying some stuff like that, he wants us to do something. He wants us to jump in when they got nothing to do with us and start a war and join this war. That's what he wants.
Pat Robertson, over the decades, he really is very fond of wars. And so he opened up his remarks by saying, we can nuke Russia. We can destroy every city.
With one submarine?
With one submarine. We can take out...
No, we're not going to do that.
Yes, but we can. We could do it. And why don't we just call his bluff?
So you want to bet a nuclear war on that, Dr.
Yes,
Robertson?
that's what he does. That's the talk of Christian Zionists. They're always talking like this, Doc. These Christian Zionists have this muscular eschatology where they believe that nuking countries and mass destruction is all part of the end times, and therefore bring it on, let's get it done.
It's crazy.
And that is not the teaching of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Jesus Christ never taught us, I want my people to be in the forefront of calling for war.
Right. Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the peacemakers, not blessed are the warmongers. So the warmongers definitely won't inherit the earth, will they?
They won't inherit the earth, but they will make a lot of money in this world. That's for sure. Now, the next one is, this is the response today of Dmitry Medvedev, former president, current prime minister. He said, Russia will put its enemies, such as the United States, in their place.
Right. So Mr. Medvedev says that Russia has the might to put enemies led by the United States in their place, and Moscow will foil the West's Russophobic plot to tear Russia apart, one of President Vladimir Putin's closest allies said on Thursday. Dmitry Medvedev, who served as president from 2008 to 2012, is now Deputy Secretary of Russia's Security Council, said the United States had stoked disgusting Russophobia in an attempt to force Russia on its knees and then rip it apart. He said, quote, it will not work. Russia has the might to put all of our brash enemies in their place, Medvedev said. And so those are very strong words because we are putting very strong words against Russia right now.
So Pat Robertson said, why don't we just call their bluff? If you read that quote to Pat Robertson, he would say, call their bluff, tell them we'll nuke.
They're bluffing.
We'll nuke all their cities, take out all their cities, destroy all their people. And Medvedev is returning the comments saying, we have the power to put America in its place. When both sides are talking like this, the odds increase that somebody's going to push the button and fire the ICBMs. And that's what we should all be concerned about.
Rick, during all the years that you're familiar with the Cold War, I was only in the Cold War part of it, and you were just a certain portion of it. Have you ever seen this level of rhetoric between the United States and Russia?
Not in my lifetime. I don't recall it.
I mean, is it even more intense, the rhetoric more intense than the Cuban Missile Crisis, let's say?
I don't recall the rhetoric being so high as the tension was high.
Right.
But the rhetoric, nobody. I don't recall American leaders. I don't recall anybody in the '60s saying, "Hey, we had to go over there and assassinate Khrushchev."
Do you think it's because there was still the reticent memory of the atomic attack on Japan, the sheer destruction of that? It was still in somewhat recent memory.
I think both sides were very fearful of a nuclear war.
But we have no memory of that now.
No.
To us, it's ancient history in ancient history books, and so it's not real to us.
I don't think modern Americans have a sense of reality about anything anymore. Everything's a video game. Everything's digital. Everything's make believe.
Right.
They really, I don't know if they comprehend what a nuclear war would look like if you survived. And I said it the other day, if you survived it, you would wish you didn't.
Right.
There's not going to be anything left. I mean, these people like that are just openly calling for nuking Russia. It is the most irresponsible talk that can come out of their mouths, talking about assassinating the president of Russia. It is irresponsible, and it is dangerous, and it is just stoking the tension that could lead to a nuclear war between Russia and the United States and other NATO powers. The next story, I got this out of Kyoto News in Tokyo. Russian ship seen in Japan Strait may be carrying troops to Ukraine.
Well, and you know, that wasn't my first thought when I saw the headline that they were carrying troops. My first thought was, you know, Russia still has an unresolved conflict with Japan that's been going on since World War II.
That's right.
And it could very well be that Russia is once again saying, listen, we have the firepower, we have the presence, we can be here anywhere we want to. And so that was my first thought, and that's based upon, you know, our visit to St. Petersburg several years ago. And so, needless to say, there is an escalation of Russian military activity, not just in the, you know, in Eastern Europe, but now we're seeing it in the Pacific as well. And so, we're going to continue to see an escalation of different military objectives here. So,
Doc, the Jerusalem Post is reporting that Syria plans to supply 40,000 mercenaries to the Russian forces to fight in Ukraine. Now, this comes from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. Look, for us right now, for you and me, it's almost impossible for us to verify any of these things.
right.
The Japanese story, we can't verify the Russian stories, we can't verify the Ukrainian stories. We're just showing our audience, trying to give you a selection of stories, because what you're getting on Fox News and CNN here in America is so one-sided.
Yeah.
You don't hear
Propaganda.
anything else
Right.
other than let's destroy Russia. So we're trying to show you a variety of stories that have been published today indicating that this war is becoming bigger and more serious. If this is true, then Bashar Assad is returning the favor to Vladimir Putin, because Putin sent Russian troops to Syria to destroy ISIS when the United States and Saudi Arabia and Israel formed the ISIS brigades and armed them to kill the Syrian soldiers and the Syrian Christians. So they have an obligation, I guess, in their mindset that they need to return the favor. So,
well, once again, this was made by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry.
Yes, so we don't
too.
know if it's true.
So
we
Syrian,
don't know.
According to him, the Syrian President Bashar Assad has promised to provide some 40,000 militants to the Russian Federation for war in Ukraine, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry reported on Thursday. Now, according to Ukrainian intelligence, weapons and other equipment will be transferred to Russia and Belarus from Syria in the near future, the statement reported, in addition to as many as 40,000 militants. A report on March 13th from Ukrainian intelligence indicated that Russia had already opened 14 recruitment centers across Syria in Damascus, Aleppo, Hama, Raqqa, and Deir el-Zor in order to strengthen its forces. I could actually see this happening. I don't know if you saw the report the other day, I forget which Israel outlet it was saying that Al-Qaeda was going to Ukraine to fight alongside the Azov battalion.
Wow.
Al-Qaeda
Yeah, Al-Qaeda
is going to Ukraine to fight with the Nazi battalion.
against the Russians. So,
And who reported that?
I forget which Israel outlet reported that, but yes, I saw that headline.
Well,
the
that
other
might have
would
to
make
verify
sense
that.
because Al-Qaeda is a creation of Western intelligence
Right.
agencies. So,
Yeah.
the
Created
next
in
one
the
is,
80s.
Stars and Stripes. The United States has over 100,000 troops in Europe for the first time since 2005. So it's an indication of the rapid buildup of American personnel in Europe. The Russians are looking at it, saying the U.S. is getting ready for an all-out war.
Right.
The United States would say, well, we're putting the troops there to defend NATO nations from a possible attack from Russia. Both sides seeing things from different perspectives, and both sides getting ready for a bigger war.
Well, and we used to have a lot more troops there back in the early 2000s, but the big difference now is that American forces are spread out far and wide across 19 countries, including old Warsaw Pact states that are now part of NATO. And so I think we're just beginning to see the start of the amount of troop deployment that we're going to be seeing over the next few months and years in Europe.
Doc, several weeks ago I asked a question to our viewers, well, how would you feel here in America if there were foreign military bases and foreign soldiers on American soil and we couldn't get rid of them? They just were here.
Right.
And moving about in the country, and we can't do anything about it. I got an email from a Trunews supporter in Germany. He goes, hey, Rick, I know exactly how you would feel. It's the way we Germans feel about the American bases here. We want you to leave. The World War II is over. Go home.
Right?
And,
why are we still there?
Yeah, you know, I'm in agreement. I think what this to me proves that NATO has been looking for a war to justify its existence.
Yep.
Without a boogeyman, there's no reason to keep building NATO. And Russia has no intention of invading France and Switzerland. It's not going to happen, Doc. It's just not going to happen. But the propaganda is we have to have NATO because the Russians are always sitting there thinking about invading Sweden.
Which they're not thinking about doing.
No. But it justifies spending billions of dollars on a war machine.
But their attitude, Russians' attitude is they continue to see nuclear armaments being moved from NATO nation to NATO nation, creeping ever closer every day to Moscow. So what's their response going to be? If one day, nuclear missiles were to show up in Cuba, let's say, all right, and that's happened in the past, but let's say they showed up today. Would we feel a threat by that? Well, of course we would. 90 miles off the coast of the U.S., yeah, we'd feel a threat.
Doc, I heard a news, or maybe, no, I read it. I saw the headline, and the headline said, Russia inching closer to NATO. The country of Russia is not moving.
No, it's not.
It's not floating.
Is gathering members.
But if you just read the headline, you would think that the Russian country is sneaking up.
Moving on.
Like NATO's sitting over here. NATO's not a country.
Right.
NATO is a military alliance. Russia is not moving.
But you could say NATO has moved.
NATO has moved a lot. And that's why this war is going on, because for about 20 years, Putin has told NATO, we will never allow you on our border. They're finally there, and now we have a war. That's the bottom line. Now, I want to show you some points made by Roman Catholic Archbishop Viganò, and he published a letter, and LifeSite News broke it down into some very easy to digest points. This is the story on LifeSite News. And this is an editorial, an op-ed, why I stand with Archbishop Viganò and his analysis of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now, we're going to show you the LifeSite News breakdown of Archbishop Viganò's letter. So we'll start with number one.
All right, so Stephen Cox at LifeSite News broke down Archbishop Viganò's points here. And he has 12 points. We're going to walk you through it. This sounds like an episode of True News, really. The first one, the entire conflict is a trap designed by the global deep state to purposely provoke a war.
It sounds a lot like me, too. That's what I've been saying from the beginning.
I'm in agreement with the Archbishop.
Let's look at number two here. The West knows expanding NATO upsets Russia, but is doing it anyway, despite previously saying it wouldn't. And he's right.
Yep.
NATO said they wouldn't
treaties.
expand. point number 3, NATO and various other countries are illegally pouring ammunition into Ukraine, thereby violating international law. This is making Ukraine a tinderbox ready to explode. No one's calling out all the countries pumping weapons into Ukraine. They get away with it by saying they're defensive weapons.
Right.
Okay. So number 4, there are many economic factors at play in Ukraine: gas pipelines, biolabs, technologies that make it attractive to outside parties. And that he's got a really great point there.
And
doesn't
also outsource
Servers.
corruption.
he? Yes.
Servers.
Number 5, President Zelensky is a
Hillary
corrupt
servers.
individual acting as a puppet of Klaus Schwab and the Great Reset. He is selling out Ukraine to the West and not preventing neo-Nazi forces trained by the U.S. from wreaking havoc on Russian-speaking Ukrainians.
And I've done tons of videos on the Great Reset. You can check those out.
So for the past 8 years, Ukraine has been bombing the daylights out of the 2 primarily Russian provinces. The world doesn't give a hoot about that. But when you start the conflict the other way, suddenly the world is concerned. So number 6, Joe Biden has been tied to Ukraine since his time as Barack Obama's vice president. His son Hunter is connected to the Ukrainian energy company Burisma. And
Yeah.
we've had detailed conversations about that. We'll have more
So
on
have
that
I.
today as well. Number 7, there was a color revolution in Ukraine backed by George Soros and other Western groups. This has caused great social unrest since taking place in 2013.
I've written an article on democrepublics.com on George Soros and his color revolution, his whole history. I've written a article on it and sourced everything on there, so y'all can look at the sources for yourselves and all that stuff. So check it out, democrepublics.com.
2014, and the U.S. was definitely involved in that. Rhetoric has been ratcheted up in the last several months by Zelensky and the West about nuclear and atomic weapons, thereby heightening Putin's mistrust and prompting him to dissolve the Minsk agreement. Number 9, the media cannot be relied on to report about what's going on in Ukraine. Their COVID track record is proof they can't do anything but lie. They are purposely trying to entice Westerners to support an escalation. Number 10, the U.S., EU, and NATO promise the Ukrainian people prosperity if they side with them, but in reality, they seek to enslave Ukrainian citizens to the same freedom-robbing and culturally depressing policies that have destroyed the now godless West. Once again, sounds like true news there. The West needs to return to Christ and seek peaceful relations with Russia so all people can live in harmony. Rome has fallen silent about the true crimes being committed across the world. Perhaps God is going to use Russia as his bulwark against the secular West. Wow, Rick. And then number 12, last one on the list here. I think there's number 12 here, if I remember right. So
No, that's it.
oh, that's it. So
But that should be the final words from the Archbishop. That'll preach. Perhaps God is going to use Russia as a bulwark against the secular, godless West. And people need to think seriously about this.
yes.
Yeah.
Now, Fox News is reporting that the U.S. must counter Russian misinformation on Ukraine with Psyops. The headline itself, is ridiculous. So, Fox News says the Russians are pumping out misinformation, and the way to counter it is for the United States to pump out misinformation.
Yes. That's really what the headline should say.
What is psyops other than propaganda?
Purposeful misinformation. It's information that is being sent out for the purpose of deception, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So the photograph there, there's Interfax as a news agency in Russia, and there's a news conference that's taking place there. So Fox is saying anybody that reads news from Interfax is getting misinformation.
That's the implication.
That's the implication. But what if you flipped it around and it said AP News? Because Interfax is no more than the Russian version of AP.
Right. So, and you could say that about any of the mainstream outlets here in the U.S. AP, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, all of them.
Oh,
So-
we want to delve into this Fox News story article about the need for Psyops.
Crazy.
Now, they're saying Psyops against the Russians, but what you have to understand, friends, the Psyops, psychological warfare operations, is against you.
Yes.
Yep.
It's against you to change the way you think about Russia.
Right. So geopolitics experts who spoke with Fox News said the U.S. should be devoting more resources to bolstering psychological warfare, an approach that would not send American troops into harm's way. So psychological operations, or PSYOPs, broadly refer to tactics geared towards shaping how people perceive events and information.
Isn't it propaganda?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Now, the U.S. perfected the craft against the Soviet Union during the Cold War, but has lagged behind in recent decades, preferring instead to concentrate on hard power.
I would challenge that statement.
I would too.
That's
I
not
believe
true.
the West has become
entire
absolutely the
time.
masters of propaganda.
Yes.
Yes.
So Russia, meanwhile, has been perfecting the craft of peddling disinformation.
And Edward Bernays, which is the nephew of Sigmund Freud, is the grandfather of propaganda, which we get psychological warfare from. So, yeah.
Against Americans to deepen racial and political divisions, all while distracting Washington and emboldening U.S. adversaries. Now, let's
Wait,
stop there.
Just stop there.
Yes.
Stop there. Tell me, Doc, have you seen the Russians promoting Black Lives Matter in the United States?
No, sir.
How about NBC?
NBC, yes.
CBS?
Yes.
CNN?
Yes.
MSNBC?
Yes.
They have waged psychological warfare against the American people using racial division.
So this statement right here, what you're reading here,
Is propaganda.
I hope you understand and discern that. Even your favorite station, Fox News, is pumping out propaganda. We go on to say here, now, PSYOPs could be a potential mitigating factor in the conflict, says Rebecca Kofler, a former Defense Intelligence Agency officer who grew up in the Soviet Union. We need to raise awareness within the Russian population about what's going on, she said, because right now the Russians and the Americans are limiting the information that flows into Russia. The Russians because they're afraid of Western propaganda, and the U.S. because we want to punish Russia. Now, they say the U.S. could send Russian people more information about VPNs, virtual proxy networks, to help them bypass government censorship, said Ivana Stradner, an advisor to the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.
So can we Americans use VPNs to bypass the American censorship?
Well, if it's good enough for the Russian people to get truth, it's good enough for us, right? So the U.S. and its Western allies ought to work with disillusioned Russians who have left the country to help promote a different narrative to Russians back home, Stradner told Fox News. This does not have to entail the typical democracy promotion that has been tried by the U.S. in other parts of the world, she clarified. Now, she goes on in this article, tackling corruption in Russia, for example, would resonate with more people, especially younger generations, because corruption impacts every facet of life. You know, you could say the same thing here in the U.S. too, couldn't you? We have to start from where we are now and right now. And right now, the number one thing is to offer Russians alternative views of the war and talk about corruption in the country, Stradner said. Corruption certainly affects every single young Russian over there.
So would Ms. Stradner talk about corruption in America? Will she talk about Hunter Biden? Will she talk about Joe Biden and his Chinese money deals? Will she talk about Hillary Clinton, her missing emails? Will she talk about all of the Clinton scandals? Just how much corruption does Ms. Stratner want to eradicate from America?
And if we can offer Russians alternative views of the war, why can't we offer Americans alternative views of the war? Because right now,
You can't.
there's only one view of the war.
But not only that, Doc, Americans can't offer alternative views on any subject.
You're absolutely
Absolutely
right,
not.
Randy.
There is only the state view.
The state view.
And the
Whether
state
it's
is not
censored.
the state is not the government. The state is the ruling class.
Yes.
The government's just a tool. The tech corporations, all of the apparatus that they have under their power, that presents what I call the state position on every issue. We saw it magnified beyond anything we've ever seen in the last 2 years with COVID.
Right.
You could not present facts. Anybody who presented facts was attacked, deplatformed, ridiculed, mocked, denigrated. Some of the most educated medical leaders had their reputations just vilified because they dared to say things that the state did not want the people to hear.
And there are many that didn't say anything at all because
They were
feared
afraid.
the state.
They were afraid.
And these are intelligent individuals, people that should know better. Now, the article goes on to say that Washington's information warfare, or excuse me, the Kremlin's information warfare will not stop with the end of the war in Ukraine, Stratner warned. She called for social media platforms to be more proactive in fighting disinformation. Sounds like something you'd hear here. I would really not exclude also the possibility of Russia to continue polarizing American society, she said. So we might actually see new protests or different unrest prior to the 2022 elections. Once again,
so the Russians are organizing Antifa and Black Lives Matter.
They're behind those rascals, huh? They're the ones behind it, right? Not George Soros, not different groups out there that were funding, buying fleets of buses for Black Lives Matter to transport people across state lines.
You want to know what Psyops looks like in real terms? How about you're watching a television news network and the city is on fire because Black Lives Matter has burned the buildings, and the news journalist is standing there saying, these are peaceful protests. Now that, my friend, is psychological warfare.
Right.
Your mind has been attacked.
Right.
Your mind, your eyes are looking at it going, they're burning the city down.
But this is a peaceful
But
protest.
this is peaceful. See, that's the psychological warfare.
But people can walk through the between velvet ropes in the U.S. Capitol on January 6th.
And that's an insurrection.
And that's an insurrection.
Yes.
So, one last quote from this article. Koffler, meanwhile, said Psyops tactics must be deployed diligently against Russia lest the Kremlin overact. The other side of Psyops is that you can unintentionally cause your adversary to overreact. So it's the kind of thing you have to be super accurate, and that requires a deep understanding of your adversary, she said. But Rick,
Wow.
Psychological warfare, Psyops, this isn't a new thing at all. I mean, it's been in play ever since there have been wars. And so,
in one form or the other,
Right.
but it's really been mastered in the past 50 some years here in the United States. You know, I keep forgetting to show this clip. I saw it months ago. The TV comedian Red Skelton, who was very popular in the 1960s. I watched an interview with him at a college. There's some students interviewing him. This was in the 1970s, and he just said to this college student, he was talking about the history of television, and he said to the student, he says, "You know, CBS was started for government propaganda." Well, CBS started in the 1920s, 30s.
yes.
Okay.
Columbia Broadcasting System, yeah.
So according to comedian Red Skelton, he knew in the 1970s that the purpose of CBS was to disseminate government propaganda, but they were doing it back in the 20s.
Wow.
Look, there were government writers inside writing articles for newspapers in the run-up to World War I. They were planting stories. The government was planting stories in newspapers to get the public to support World War I,
Right.
both here in the United States and in Great Britain and Europe.
And they were organized in doing it too.
Yes.
It wasn't just a casual thing, let's plant a story here or there. No, there were groups that worked together, had meetings about it.
H.G. Wells, the famous sci-fi writer, H.G.
Everybody
Wells
remember that
started
radio.
his writing career in London, writing psyops propaganda to persuade the British people to support Great Britain entering World War I against Germany. That was his job.
So he just went writing fiction for one organization to writing fiction for himself.
That's right. And so it's no surprise that around 1940 he wrote a book called New World Order.
That's right.
He was a globalist. He was a one worlder, and he wanted a new world order. So I want to show you another story on Psyops to give you a little bit more insight into this. This is from Modern Diplomacy. Persuade, change, influence, the use of psychological operations against the Russian Federation.
Right. This was just published a week ago, Rick, this particular article in Modern Diplomacy. And it says in the article, given the situation in Russia, it is beneficial to explore ways in which Putin's aggression can be stopped or completely thwarted. In better assisting the Ukrainian government and people, the West's foreign intelligence entities should look towards psychological operations and warfare as a method of assisting Ukraine. Now we go back down memory lane a little bit. The RAND Corporation defines PSYOP as a method of warfare which involves the planned use of propaganda and other psychological operations to influence the opinions, emotions, attitudes, and behavior of opposition groups.
Just stop right there. That is what the U.S. government does to you and me.
Right now.
To the American people.
Now look back over the past 2 years. Were you in a PSYOP the past 2 years?
QAnon was a PSYOP.
Yes.
QAnon was a PSYOP, and a lot of you fell for it. They have PSYOP operations running every day against various groups of people.
Now, Encyclopedia Britannica expands upon the methodology a bit further, describing psychological warfare as propaganda supported by such military, economic, or political measures generally intended to demoralize the enemy, to break his will to fight or resist, and sometimes to render him favorably disposed to one's position, in addition to supporting an allied force or guerrilla group.
Okay, so let's stop again. Think about what the U.S. government, the news media, the ruling class, with all their power, the tech companies, everything. Look at what they have done to the American people over the, let's just say, the past 25 years. Propaganda supported by the military, economic, political measures, generally intended to do what? Demoralize the enemy. Who's the enemy? The American people.
Right.
The public. The patriots, the Christians, the conservatives,
You see,
the traditionalists.
They don't.
All right, I got to end it there, y'all. It's getting a little late. Appreciate you for joining me. Check out democrepublic.com for the latest in news. You know, I'll be putting out a lot of content. Check all my stuff out in Linktree. That link is in the description. Till next time, peace.